I've always hated train stations. The screech of steel on steel, the loudspeakers, robotic announcements, even the smell of coffee and dieselitol makes my chest tighten in a way I still can explain, even after 20 years. But back then, I didn't hate them. I didn't feel much of anything, really. I was just a 12-year-old girl trying to figure out why her family seemed to have space for everyone but her. My name is Megan. I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was one of those neighborhoods where everyone knew each other's business and the streets were filled with porches and gossip. Our house was a modest 2-story, the kind with creaky stairs and a basement that always smelled like wet cement. From the outside, we probably looked like a typical middle-class family. My mom, dad, older brother Josh, and me. But from the inside, God, it was like walking on broken glass every day. Josh was the golden boy, straight A's, quarterback of the middle school football team, the kid who could do no wrong. If he so much as took out the trash, he'd be praised like he donated a kidney. I, on the other hand, could come home with a report card full of A's and still get asked why I didn't help my mom fold the laundry. I used to think I was just being dramatic, that maybe I really was too sensitive. But now I know better. What I was feeling was neglect. What I was living through was emotional starvation. My parents weren't monsters in the traditional sense. They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. But they had this way of making me feel invisible. If I spoke, they'd talk over me. If I cried, they'd say I was too emotional. If I tried to join a conversation at the dinner table, my dad would raise his hand and go, "Not now, Megan." And it wasn't just once or twice, it was every single day. I remember one time in 5th grade, I spent weeks drawing a mural for the school hallway. The principal even sent a letter home, praising my talent. I showed it to my mom, heart racing with pride. And she glanced at it and said, "Well, let's hope you don't grow up to be one of those starving artists." Then she tossed it onto the kitchen counter like it was a flyer for a garage sale. Josh, meanwhile, brought home a plastic trophy for best attitude at football practice, and it got a spot on the mantle. I tried not to let it get to me. I really did. I buried myself in books and art, sketching late into the night under my blanket with a flashlight. Drawing was the only place I felt seen. Even if it was just by the characters I created, I knew I didn't fit in with my family, but I kept hoping maybe one day they'd notice me. Maybe one day I'd say something that mattered. That day never came. Instead, what came was a family trip that would tear the floor out from under me. It was the first week of July. I remember because the town fireworks were still fresh in my mind, and I had a sunburn on the back of my neck from watching them. My parents told me we were going on a day trip to Chicago. "Just us," my dad said, smiling a little too much. "We'll grab some pizza, maybe see the lake, something fun before school starts up again." I was surprised but excited. It had been years since I'd done anything alone with them. Usually, Josh was the center of attention. He was away at football camp that week, and maybe they were finally trying with me. We drove for hours. I remember watching the trees blur past on the highway, sketch pad in my lap, earbuds in. My mom kept giving me glances in the rearview mirror, but I didn't think much of it. We barely spoke on the way there. When we pulled into the station parking lot, I asked, "Are we taking a train somewhere?" My dad just smiled. Sort of. He said, "We walked into the terminal It was busy people rushing around with luggage, announcements blaring over the PA system, the floor sticky with old soda. My mom handed me a crumpled $20 bill and said, "Go get yourself a snack." I hesitated. "Aren't we eating together?" "Just go," she said, brushing her hand through my hair like she couldn't wait to get it over with. So I went. I bought a bottled water and a small bag of chips from the vending machine, then turned around. They were gone. At first, I thought maybe they were playing a joke. Maybe they ducked into a bathroom or gone to grab tickets. I wandered the terminal, checking every bench, every corner. Nothing. I called my mom's phone, Erin, then went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. After 15 minutes, I started to panic. I sat on a bench and waited. Maybe I missed them. Maybe they were looking for me too. Hours passed. I watched the sky outside turn from blue to orange. My stomach growled, my fingers trembling as I checked the time again and again. At one point, a security guard asked if I was okay. I told him my parents had gone to get something and would be right back. He nodded and moved on. At 9 p.m., I accepted it. They weren't coming back. They had left me their 12-year-old daughter in a strange city with no ID, no phone, and $17 left in my pocket. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, numb, like my brain couldn't process what had happened. Who does that? Who brings their child to another state and then vanishes? It wasn't until the next morning, after I'd spent the night curled up on a bench hugging my backpack, that I cried. And when I did, it wasn't quiet. It was this deep, aching sob that felt like it came from the bottom of my soul. I remember whispering to myself, "They'll come back. They'll come back." Like maybe if I said it enough times, it would be true. But it wasn't. Eventually, someone noticed me. A woman named Leanne, a janitor working the early shift, found me and called the police. I told them everything, but even the officers looked stunned. "Are you sure your parents didn't just get lost?" one of them asked gently. I shook my head. I told them what I knew, that they left me there, that I was supposed to be going on a family trip, that they'd smiled the whole time. What kind of joke was this? Over the next few days, I was placed in temporary care while authorities tried to track down my family. They found them, of course. My dad claimed it was a misunderstanding. My mom said I must have run off. But their stories didn't match, and the state didn't buy it. That week, I became a ward of the state. My parents never fought to get me back. They didn't file any appeals. They didn't even visit me once. That's when it truly hit me. I wasn't wanted. Not really. Not by them. I remember staring at the ceiling of the foster home that first night, trying to wrap my mind around it. My brother, did he know? Was he in on it? Or was he just as shocked? The thought of him laughing about it at camp, thinking it was some grand prank, made my stomach turn. 12 years old? That's how old I was when I was officially abandoned. Not because I was a criminal, not because I was violent or troubled, but because I wasn't who they wanted. People talk about trauma like it's always loud lights, slamming doors, or screams, or bruises. But for me, trauma was silence. It was the empty space at dinner. It was birthdays forgotten. It was the sound of my parents' car tires driving away while I stood in a crowd of strangers. And for years, I blamed myself. The days after I was abandoned didn't feel real. I barely remember the police officers' voices as they tried to talk to me in the station. Their words were underwater echoes, muffled, distant, irrelevant. All I could focus on was the candy wrapper on the floor and the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock above the information booth. Time kept moving, but I didn't speak much. I didn't cry again. My emotions folded inward like origami, compacted into something small, something that wouldn't take up space. That felt safest. I was placed with a temporary foster family within 2 days. Mrs. Linda and her husband, Carl, they lived in a modest, one-story home that smelled like cinnamon and old books. Linda had soft eyes and gray curls and baked cookies that made the house feel warm even when everything inside me was frozen. She didn't ask me too many questions. She just left a journal by my bedside, a simple one with a navy blue cover and a pen loop on the side. I didn't open it for weeks. The first few nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd wake up thinking I missed a call or that my mom would knock on the door and say, "Okay, joke's over." But the only sound was the ticking of a small clock on the nightstand and the distant hum of Carl's radio in the garage. I stayed quiet, didn't speak unless spoken to. I ate my food mechanically, carefully. I said please and thank you like it was the only armor I had left. I went back to school in late August. It was a new school in a new district with new faces that didn't know me. I liked it that way. No one whispered behind my back. No one stared at me with pity. I didn't make friends, not at first, but I watched people. I observed how the other girls laughed during lunch, how they slung their backpacks over one shoulder, how they braided each other's hair during study hall. I wanted to be like them, but I didn't know how. The counselor at school, Ms. Tiller, had a floral dress for every day of the week and spoke in a voice that was gentle but never babying. She asked if I'd like to come in and talk. I said no at first, several times. But one rainy Tuesday, I agreed. I didn't talk much the first session. I mostly stared at the carpet while she asked questions I didn't want to answer. How are you sleeping? Fine. Are you having nightmares? No. What do you miss the most? I shrugged. But the truth, I missed being wanted. I missed the illusion that my parents loved me. The second time I went, I said one sentence. They left me. It broke something open. And from there, little by little, I started to speak. It wasn't linear. Some days I felt almost normal. Other days I wanted to disappear entirely. I blamed myself. Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I was too weird. Maybe I wasn't pretty enough or obedient enough. Maybe Josh really was better and I was just a leftover. That internal script became a loop I couldn't escape. In my journal, I started writing conversations I wished had happened. Mom, we're sorry. We were wrong. We miss you. Me. Why did you do it? Dad, because we were scared. Not of you, of ourselves. Me. I needed you. Them. We know. We're sorry. Writing those scenes didn't fix anything, but it helped me see that they were missing. That helped somehow. At school, I slowly made one friend. Her name was Clarissa. She had frizzy red hair and a loud laugh that could shatter a silence like glass. She sat next to me in English and noticed that I always doodled in my notebook margins. One day, she passed me a folded note during a boring lecture on Shakespeare. Inside It said, "Do you always draw faces or just the ones you can't talk to?" I looked at her, startled. She winked and turned back to the board. That was the first time I smiled in weeks. We didn't talk about my past for months. We didn't have to. She invited me over to her house, where her mom made too much spaghetti and her dad grilled everything like it was a science experiment. I sat at their table and watched them laugh and argue and tease each other. And it was like watching a foreign language I desperately wanted to learn. One afternoon, after we'd finished watching Spirited Away for the 5th time, she asked gently, "So, your parents?" I swallowed hard. "They left me." She didn't ask why. She just reached over, took my hand, and said, "That's F***ed up. But I'm glad you're here." And for the first time, I believed someone meant it. My caseworker, Trina, was firm but kind. She told me that the state had opened a formal abandonment file, that my parents had signed away their rights when they didn't show up for court. Josh, she said, was still with them. I asked once if he ever asked about me. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "I think you already know." I stopped asking. Linda and Carl never pressured me to call them mom or dad, but they bought me sketchbooks, praised my grades, gave me a corner of the living room to set up an art desk. Carl taught me how to change a tire. Linda baked me a cake on my 13th birthday and said, "You're not broken. You're building." And somehow I kept seeing Miss Tiller. My journal grew thick with pagesum, angry, some hopeful. I started to understand what trauma really was. Not just one bad event, but the way your body never stopped waiting for the next bad thing. How it rewired your trust, your voice, your very sense of belonging. I learned that my silence wasn't weakness. It was survival. One afternoon during therapy, I confessed something I hadn't told anyone. I still think it was my fault. Sometimes I think maybe I deserved it. She leaned forward. That thought, "That's not your voice. That's the voice of people who didn't know how to love you. You survived something cruel, Megan. You didn't cause it." That stayed with me. So did the small moments. The time I got a B in math and Carl said, "That's still better than I ever did," and handed me a cookie. The time Clarissa shoved me into the snow and I laughed so hard I forgot my last name. The time Linda kissed my forehead and I didn't flinch. Those moments became bricks. And little by little, I was building something. Around this time, I entered an art contest for a local library. The theme was "What Makes a Home." I almost didn't submit anything. I didn't know how to draw something I hadn't really had. But in the end, I painted a girl sitting under a tree, surrounded by sketchbooks and books, a dog at her side, a tent behind her. In the sky above, I wrote, "Home is the place where your silence is heard." It won 2nd place. I was 14, and for the first time, I felt proud. My healing wasn't sudden. It didn't come with a big epiphany or some grand gesture. It came in soft, slow, inches through routines, conversations, and countless nights crying into a pillow I finally trusted enough to hold me. I still avoided train station. I still sometimes wondered if my mom ever thought about me, if she regretted it, if she even could. But I stopped believing it was because of who I was. I started to understand it was because of who they were. And more than that, I started to see glimpses of who I could be, someone who survived someone who mattered. It had been 15 years since I last heard their voices. 15 years since a cold metal bench, a police station, and the realization that love shouldn't feel disposable. Love, I had built a life, a quiet, strong, stable life. I was working as a children's book illustrator now, living with Brian, who had a calming presence and a habit of writing me notes on the fridge, small things like "you remembered milk. You're a legend." Our home had warm lighting, plants I managed to keep alive, and a studio that overlooked a community garden. It was peaceful until the letter arrived. It was a plain envelope, addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize at first, but the signature hit like a steel bat. Karen, my mother. Dear Megan, we heard from your cousin. You're doing well. We're glad your father's not doing well. His health is failing, and he'd like to see you one last time. I know we made mistakes. Maybe this could be a chance to talk. Love, Mom. I reread it 3 times. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and didn't touch it again for a week. But it gnawed at me. Even after all these years, the part of me that still wondered why, that fragile thread of longing lit up again like a fuse. I told Clarissa first. She was the one who had held my hand the day I got my GED and later helped me pick out a dress for my first gallery show. Don't you dare feel guilty, she said immediately, folding laundry on my couch like she lived there, which, let's be honest, she kinda did. I'm not. I lied. You are. She tossed a sock at me. Let me guess. You're thinking maybe they changed. Maybe they feel bad. Maybe you owe them something? I didn't answer. She sighed. Listen, you don't owe anyone who left you in a train station a damn thing. Not a visit, not forgiveness, not closure. Especially not when you had to claw your way back to who you are without them. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Brian didn't push either way. He just asked, what would seeing them give you? I didn't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. So I wrote back, short, if you want to meet, it will be on my terms. Public place. No emotional ambushes. They agreed. We met at a quiet diner just off the highway, a place that served burnt coffee and had peeling booths that stuck to your skin in summer. I walked in. They were already seated. My mother looked older, thinner, grayer. My father looked fragile. His eyes were sunken. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his mug. No one hugged. Hi, Megan, my mom said. I sat down. Let's not pretend this is normal. There was an awkward silence. The waitress came and took our orders. No one really wanted food. My father spoke first. You look grown. I am more silent. Then my mom began. We made a terrible mistake. We were young, overwhelmed. You were adults. I cut in. You left a 12-year-old girl in a city she didn't know with no plan, no money, and no goodbye. That wasn't a mistake. That was abandonment. Her mouth opened slightly. But I wasn't done. You signed away your rights. You didn't write. You didn't call. You made a choice. My father looked down at his hands. We didn't know how to handle you, he mumbled. You were always distant, sensitive, and Josh wasn't, I said, my voice low and shaking. Or was it just easier to scapegoat the quiet one? They both winced. You can be sorry, I said, but you don't get to rewrite history, and you don't get to ask anything of me now. We're not asking for anything, my mother whispered. Aren't you? I said, this whole meeting was about easing your guilt. You want forgiveness so you can feel better, but I'm not your redemption arc. My mom's eyes welled up. You're angry. I was for a long time. Now, I'm just done letting that anger eat me. They sat in silence. I could feel their discomfort. For once, it wasn't mine to carry. I stood up. I don't need an apology. I don't need a relationship. I needed parents. You weren't there. My mom reached out. Megan, please? I stepped back. No, you don't get to hurt me anymore. I walked out of that diner feeling like I had stepped out of a shadow I didn't see. No, I was still standing in. Brian was waiting in the car. He didn't ask how it went. He just handed me a water bottle and played our favorite playlist. Later that night, I opened a new sketchbook. I drew a tree tall, grounded, surrounded by storm clouds, but the roots were glowing. And for the first time in years, I didn't dream about that train station. I dreamed about home, the one I built. Without them, and that made it mine. The morning light poured through the curtains of our kitchen like golden syrup. My son, Caleb, sat cross-legged on the floor drawing a dragon, his tongue sticking out in concentration. Across the room, Brian was flipping pancakes, humming off key to some retro pop tune on the radio. The dog snored under the table. This was peace, not perfection, not the absence of hardship, but peace. Sometimes I still startled awake, heart racing. Sure, I'd forgotten something vital. That 12-year-old inside me still whispered doubts now and then. You're safe now, I'd whisper back. I didn't get here overnight, or even in a decade. I remember those first few years after the diner. I didn't cry. Not for them. I'd done my crying long ago. Instead, I found joy in the quiet wins. A book launch with my name in elegant gold. The first time, Caleb said, Mom, look what I made, and held up a crayon-scrawled superhero. The therapy sessions where I didn't talk about them at all. I built a life that didn't require their validation. Every act of stability became a rebellion. Every hug I gave my son was a promise to never repeat history. I started volunteering at a local youth center teaching art classes to kids who didn't always have a safe home. One girl, Jamie, came in silent and defensive. I recognized her walls because I'd built the same ones. Slowly, she began to open up through sketches and stories. I don't talk much, she once said, but I feel loud when I draw. I smiled. That's how I started to healing, I realized, isn't about fixing everything. It's not about pretending the train station didn't happen, or pretending I wasn't terrified and alone with $7 in my pocket. It's about this. It's about choosing to stop carrying the weight they handed you. It's about building peace, brick by brick, even if your hands are still shaking. Caleb was 8 now, full of questions, soft-hearted, curious. Mom, what was your mom like? It came out of nowhere one afternoon while we were walking the dog. I blinked at him. She wasn't very kind, I said slowly. She made some big mistakes. He looked thoughtful. But you're kind. My throat tightened. I tried to be. He slipped his hand into mine. You're a good mom. And just like that, something heavy inside me broke quietly like a frozen river finally thawing. Every once in a while, I still get a birthday card from Karen. No return address. No apology. Just a simple thinking of you. I don't reply. I don't have to, because forgiveness isn't always a door you open for them. Sometimes it's a door you close so you can finally stay warm. It was a cool spring morning. Caleb had gone off to school. Brian was out front trimming hedges. I stood on our porch, sipping coffee from my favorite chipped mug, the one that said made of starlight and grit. I looked at the horizon. The birds were noisy. The garden needed weeding. Bills needed paying. And still, it was a good life, a healed life. I picked up my journal and wrote one last entry. They left me at a train station, but I built the tracks back to myself, and I didn't just survive, I arrived.